Hey everyone, this podcast is part of Story Mode, the podcast network of Gamefully Unemployed. You can support us and gain access to other great exclusive podcasts at patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. That's patreon.com/GAMEFULLY unemployed, which is spelled like it sounds.
Spooky podcast.
Spooky.
Oh,
it's
hello.
Spooky.
Spookies.
Hello.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
My name is David Bell.
My name is Tom Ryman.
And we just watched Candyman.
Candyman?
What's it called?
Candyman.
Candyman?
Candyman.
This is where it all began. The story of Candyman. Local character, he walk around handing out candy to the neighborhood kids. One day, a couple of kids get razor blades in their candy. Police come around. That's when I saw the true face of fear.
Get on your knees. Hands, hands, hands.
They beat him, tortured him, killed him, right there on the spot. A couple weeks later, more razor blades and more candy. He been innocent.
So he's real?
Candyman ain't a he. Candyman's the whole damn hive.
Candyman.
Candyman.
I
think we've done it enough.
I think we summoned like 6 Candymen.
Right, we're going to have like 2 or 3 Candies men.
Yeah.
Or Candy Men. Candy's Man.
That should be the sequel. Candy's Man.
Just like Aliens, Candyman.
All right. What I guess I want to start this off. So, this is the film by Nia DaCosta.
Nia DaCosta. Yeah, Nia DaCosta.
Which it's I don't know. It was written by Jordan Peele. I'm bothered by Twitter and everything being like Jordan Peele's Candyman.
That is, yes.
Because I'm like, there's a whole other person who directed and wrote this.
That's almost a separate conversation, which is, but it's not though, because it relates to what the movie is about.
Yeah, because it's. Yeah, exactly. I get it. Jordan Peele's hot right now. I get it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, yeah. There's misogyny in there, but it's also
yes.
I'm butt snotty. I shouldn't even say butt. There is misogyny in there, and it is the result of just completely cold marketing techniques, where they're like, Jordan Peele is popular. He's a name people recognize and associate with prestige horror right now. Let's really focus on Jordan Peele's connection. Yeah,
which sucks because it gives this lady not an opportunity to make her mark as, like a horror icon.
She's not getting the same, like...
Jordan Peele had to start at some point.
Yeah,
and let this lady start.
Yes, yeah. So it's like with Get Out, where it was like Blumhouse.
Right.
But to less of a degree, because I feel like Get Out was kind of the thing that made Blumhouse prestige, right?
Right. And there was a novelty of like Jordan Peele?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. That's true. There was the fact that he was already established in a completely different genre as a sketch comedian.
But yeah, Nia DaCosta's Candyman, folks.
Yes. Yeah. So
we both grew up on Candyman, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of the first horror movies I ever saw. It's one of those horror movies where I just grew up loving it, and then you watch it as an adult, and you're like, oh, this is about a bunch of other things, too.
Oh, yeah, this is a real heavy movie. It wasn't a movie... It wasn't anywhere close to my first horror movie, but this was one next to, like, the original Alien. This is one of the horror movies that fucked me up bad as a kid.
Oh, yeah. No, it
the
wasn't
original
my first...
Candyman.
Yeah, it was near my first. Like, it was me and my big sister, watching horror movies, stuff like The Evil Dead, this, and so on. And so, I don't know. Yeah, this movie has been in my life for most of my life.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of hype, a lot of buildup leading to this film. How did you like the new Candyman?
I liked it.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because a lot of the kind of insider buzz on this movie was that it was a disaster.
That is
And,
very
like,
surprising.
you could kind of see it in the marketing approach leading up to this movie was supposed to come out last year, and it had a huge marketing push.
Yeah.
Then it got delayed with everything because of COVID.
Right.
It got delayed to now. And in the past, like there were some test screenings, I think, or like industry buzz started to build up around this film earlier this year, and the buzz was that it was bad. So going into this release, like the marketing had really cooled down. Like I almost forgot it was coming out this weekend.
Right. And then Rotten Tomatoes started giving it good reviews.
Yes.
Because I had heard from you that it was bad. And I was like, I don't want to believe that.
Right,
and then
because the trailers were so good. Like you're watching this, like, man, this movie, and of course it wouldn't be the first time people have been burned by a good trailer for a bad movie.
Right.
But it just seemed like I couldn't wrap my mind around how this movie would be bad, and then going into it, I was like, oh, it's not bad. Okay.
Yeah, that's the secret. It's not bad.
It's not bad.
I think maybe just the wrong people saw it and started that. Like,
I think
people who didn't understand it or weren't fans of the original. I don't know what it was.
But I feel like there's a lot of expectation built around people not actually knowing what Candyman is.
Yeah.
There's a perception I've noticed around this movie on social media, and then also at the website I work for, we were getting, a lot of freelance pitches about Candyman, talking about it in a way that made it very clear they had not seen the original movie. So it was like, I feel like you're expecting something that this movie isn't going to be. Like I'm reading right now on the Wikipedia where it was like, a part of the push for this movie was like, it's the Black Freddy or the Black Jason. And I'm like, that is not what Candyman is.
No, not at all.
Yeah, so if you go into this movie expecting a slasher movie, that's not what it is.
Right, and that's not what the original
And that's not what it has ever been. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was wondering if there was going to be people reviewing it of like, oh, Hollywood, they went woke with Candyman or something like that.
I'm sure
like not people who just have no idea what the original
I'm
is
sure
about.
that opinion is out there too. But I've seen the reverse of that also, where it's like they've taken it and made it actually about something, and I'm like, that's fair because the original movie. The original movie is about a white tourist in black culture, and then a lot of themes that go alongside it, like fetishization and white saviorism, and then also just how we sort of appropriate violence and tragedy for our own benefit. And so that's what that first movie was about, but it was written by Clive Barker and it was directed by a white man. So it's like, this is a story about black tragedy from white artists. So like, I get that this movie it's about the same thing, but it's by a black director and a black producer, and it
talks more about the art aspect of it, which I really like.
Yeah, there's a lot. I got a lot of Velvet Buzzsaw from this one.
Yes. Yeah, because it's
basically
what
the first one was about. Yeah.
Yeah, what the first one did, where it's like, I'm doing a school project. I'm doing I'm like studying these people. I'm butting into their lives, and it's like the beginning of gentrifying an area.
Yeah.
This is the completion.
Yes.
Where it's like, it has been gentrified, and now and now we're talking about art, kind of appropriating this stuff.
Yeah.
And violence, and it was a really interesting direction to take it. And it is very similar to the original, but it is adding something.
It's an evolution of it for sure.
Yeah.
Because that conversation has evolved in the intervening 30
exactly.
years. But all I was saying was that the reverse of that, where I had seen some reactions where it's like, oh, this new movie's actually about something, and it's the same. It boils down to the same thing where it's like,
it's about something. It's like,
I think a lot of people just haven't seen Candyman.
Right. Also, you see Clive Barker's Candyman. It's like, that can't possibly be about something. And it's like, I kind of get it. Like, that movie, everything from like Philip Glass doing fucking theme is like very weird. For its time, for its director, it's oddly ahead of its time. Like,
it really is. Like, this is the first time
kind
I
of
saw
a slow burn.
Yeah. Just real quick before we get into it. Like the first time I saw Candyman was when me and my friends rented it because we thought it would be a dumb 90s slasher movie to laugh at. And we were
Yeah.
That movie fucking ruined the night.
Oh yeah.
That is a fucking intense movie.
It really is. And I really liked this one.
Yeah.
I wish Ted Raimi got killed in it immediately. But, what are you going to do? I think most of my I have some critique of this film, but it's mostly from like a dumb Candyman fan perspective. One being, and obviously we're going to spoil this, but
So definitely see the movie if you don't want to. If you don't want to rush out to the theater. Just wait a couple of weeks because the release windows have been way shortened. Stuff is coming to VOD in like 3 to 4 weeks. So.
This is going to be for Halloween, this is going to be, and of course sooner. But like my biggest gripe with it, and it's such a weird one, is like, I wanted to see more Tony Todd. We don't get him for most of the film.
No, you don't, but I like how they evolved it.
Yeah.
Where he says Candyman's it's the whole damn hive, which is a line in the trailer. And he's talking about, it's just this, it's the systemic violence. It's just like Candyman is every victim of racial violence in this area.
Yeah, that's manifested into this entity. Including Tony Todd's background.
Tony. And Tony Todd was like the archetype for it. He's the reason why they all have hook hands and, and the bees.
Which is why not have Tony Todd play Candyman for most of it? And they don't. And I assume they would have if they could have. I assume it's because Tony Todd was busy, or I don't know why. That's what's the most baffling thing to me is Tony Todd basically shows up right at the end.
At the very end, yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know, that voice, that face, that presence, it's, like, if Candyman's going to be a manifestation of all this, like, why not take the form of the most iconic part of Candyman?
I get it. It's an evolution. He's still there.
I do. He is still there.
And Tony Todd's performance is part of what there's so many elements that are just firing on all cylinders in that first movie, but obviously his performance, specifically his voice, you mentioned his voice.
Yeah.
It's like we landed on this kind of, at the website I currently write for, where it's almost like a Dracula-esque, like, seductiveness to his performance. That's not really this movie is not that. Like, this movie, that's not what its focus is.
No, but it is, Candyman's in it, and I was surprised not to hear his voice more, because he's very talkative in the first movie.
He is. This is more
he's a chatterbox.
This is more about the seduction of the idea as opposed to the seduction of the figure himself.
Yeah.
Which is, like, this one is about, it's about Yahya Abdul-Mateen II. He is an artist. We come to find out that he is actually the baby that Virginia Madsen rescues from the bonfire in the end of the first film.
Yeah, that was a cool idea.
But he's an artist. He's young. He's kind of like looking for his next inspiration, and he lands on Candyman because he and his curator girlfriend just moved to what is now the gentrified Cabrini Green, and there's a big conversation about how artists participate in gentrification because they're usually the beginning, like the young hip crowd is usually the beginning of gentrification. They're the first people who come in who will be able to afford it while it's still low income. Right. And then it kind of gets built up around that. And then it's also related to that. It's how a lot of art glorifies and fetishizes tragedy and violence. There's a conversation about true crime in it, and like this shit like My Favorite Murder. There's like his dealer manager friend is a white dude named Clive. Who's encouraging him to like he's like, tap into more of that, like, black suffering is basically what he's telling him.
Yeah, exactly.
So we can sell it. And
this guy, he's like ambitious.
He wants it. He's chasing the clout. So it's like the seduction is less about Tony Todd being like a Dracula type, and it's more about the seduction of, if I exploit this, I can become famous.
Right. Yeah. And like spreading the word of Candyman. Yeah. And it actually begins, I liked this. They don't tell the story of Candyman. They tell Helen's story. That's the first story they tell, and it's from the perspective of what like people thought about Helen.
And that's
which is that she kidnapped a baby and threw it in the fire, and everybody stopped her. And so that was a really cool way of doing it. And so he's going around like the old projects, what's left of them, which is a great setting for a horror movie, mind you. Like it's it continues to be.
It was really effective in the original too, and the way
it's weird that more movies didn't explore that idea. But it could. And so he runs into a guy, an old man, who knows about Candyman, right? And the idea is no one really knows about Candyman yet. And or rather, like, it's sort of a dying legend, it felt like.
Right, because they gentrified the neighborhood.
Right.
And they kind of moved all the people on, and he learns from his mom later that after what happened to him, everybody that lived in Cabrini Green was sort of like, we're not going to ever talk about Candyman ever again.
Right. And in this case, it was, a man who's going around the neighborhood getting candy to children. You see it in the trailers. They show in the flashbacks. This guy, they reveal, like, immediately, he's the kid that you see in the trailer who Candyman gives candy to. And he screams and accidentally alerts the cops. And the cops come in, and they do the cops' presence. I loved this. They treat the cops like a horror movie monster.
It's a repeated motif of something outside trying to get in, and they start it where you hear just a million footsteps running towards this basement where the kid just screamed and they're about to beat Candyman to death. And then that sound motif is repeated. We hear it when the bees are trying to get out of the mirror. It's that constant tapping against the glass. It starts to rain more and more as the movie progresses. Yeah. So like the scene where he's in the hospital walking down the hall, it's like tapping on the outside.
Right. Yeah. And they also do like a reveal in the door where the cop pops his head up.
Yes.
Like a fucking horror movie.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And they kill this man. And so he tells him that story, and this is how he learns about it. And he basically fills an art exhibit with this research of Candyman, including a mirror that you can say Candyman 5 times at.
Yeah. I don't know why you'd want to.
Yeah. But Clive ends up doing it first. Clive is the second person murdered.
Yes.
Yeah. And then later, there's a high school girl there who later gets the idea. So like the death of this, what is Clive's relation? He's like
he's a
curator.
He's a dealer.
Yeah, he's a dealer.
His girlfriend's she's the exhibitor. She designs and puts on the showings, the exhibitions.
And so they do a beautiful thing where, much like the main lady in the first one, like he sees on the news that the dealer has died, someone who he knew horribly, and they name his art in the news story, and he's
him
like
by name.
Yeah, and he goes and he's excited. He's like, they said my name, and his first reaction is he's happy.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of the theme of the movie. Which is that like the violence is boosting him as an artist.
Yeah.
Which is a great idea. It's a great dynamic.
Yeah.
That Candyman is making him more famous.
Yeah.
And then of course later he meets with an art critic who didn't like it at first.
Yeah.
But now likes it.
Because it's notorious and it's been, that's a lot of like the Velvet Buzzsaw vibe I got.
Yes. Absolutely.
And just how it's about, people not believing in something and just wanting it because for personal gain, and then abusing and exploiting it,
Yeah, and of course she gets super murdered.
Yeah,
and like they don't do
in a really fun shot like this.
Yeah,
this is
was great.
Another big reason, apart from all the many obvious reasons why Nia DaCosta's name should be associated with this film over Jordan Peele's, but like it's well directed. There's a lot of really cool shots and like really interesting motifs that are repeated.
Right, and it doesn't feel like Jordan Peele style.
Not at all.
Which is important to note.
Yeah.
Because, sometimes Spielberg produces something that you watch and you're like,
this is a Spielberg movie. Yeah.
Yeah. This isn't that case. It doesn't feel like Jordan Peele's work.
No.
It feels uniquely different, and that's important. And yeah, it's really... That shot's really good. I like that that's a mirror of the shot where he first goes there. They do or she does almost like a Brian De Palma shot where it does this like slow zoom in across Chicago to show him. And then that shot
zooms
kind of
out.
completing that scene is a slow zoom out. I don't know. There's a very thoughtful film.
Yeah. All the the repeated mirror imagery.
Yeah.
It's just like there's so much. It's just very good. It felt classic. Like it felt like it reminded me of like The Exorcist or like older horror films.
I will say, okay, this isn't. I'm not saying this as a critique.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't that scared of this movie.
No, it's not. But that could just be us.
Yes. There's a little bit of a jump scare element, but they use it, like for example, for the cops. She uses it in places that are really significant. I would say. Mm-hmm. There's just it's kind of reminds me in a loose way of the remake of It. That's another series of films that didn't scare me, but there's certain imagery in it that I don't forget. And that's kind of the same with this, is that there's a lot of shit that's like, oh, this is just living in my head now.
Yeah.
It's such a good shot. And like, it's shit that's creepy.
Yeah.
When he first is at the art critic's house and he plays the duck soup game with Candyman, and then the art critic is like, what are you doing? And he looks over to her and he can see through into the bathroom. And you see Candyman like vaguely in the mirror, and then he just slowly goes whoop.
He slips out of the doorway. Yeah. There's a lot just in that scene. There's he keeps looking in the mirror and looking back, and there'll be small things like the light in the room shuts off very subtly in it. But like the first time, this movie doesn't go nuts with jump scares the way you might expect it to, because we don't ever see Candyman without it's never purposeless. You know what I mean?
Also, unlike the original, he's only until the end. He's only in reflections.
We never see him. Yeah.
Yeah, and they do a good job where there's certain shots that are these wider shots, and then you look and you're like, oh shit, there he is.
Yeah.
He's like Waldo. He's like Waldo in some of the shots, and it's really effective.
But you don't see him, like the first time you see him, when Yaya summons him for the first time, like that's the first jump scare you get, and it only happens to let us know that, okay, he's been summoned, he's here now.
Yeah.
And he's here, and that's like, that is a signifier for the rest of the film that we know, okay, he is now here for the rest of the film.
Yeah.
So
he's hanging out.
Yeah. So it's never just like for the sake of having something spooky pop up in a mirror.
No, and like I said, there weren't many in terms of jump scares, and it wasn't really like, it wasn't like a crutch. It wasn't really that present. It was I would say fine. Like most horror movies have jump scares, even the really good ones.
Yeah, I'm just saying
it's just a thing that we have.
Yeah, it's also this character specifically. It's a ghost that exists in a mirror.
Yeah.
So it's like that is jump scares.
Right. And I mean, the original Candyman has jump scares.
Yeah,
it's about how they are done and why they're done, and it's done very well in this.
Yeah. And
again, for the most part, it's more about images that just creep me out, that stuck with me.
It's more about images and mood. Like this movie and the original movie are way less about having a spooky ghost pop up in a mirror and more about just like the entire time you're just like, man,
right.
I don't feel good about any of this.
Yeah. And yeah, this is no different. So like, they're clearly setting up a pattern where like people are dying near him. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of know, like, much like the original Candyman, he's going to get implicated. I thought they did a really good job with how that happens, because it doesn't actually really happen until, spoilers, after he is killed.
Yes.
Like it's kind of like the cops put it together later. So he's never like pursued.
No, he was never a suspect. And it goes, it's the first, like you pointed out, the first story they tell us is the story of Virginia Madsen's character and how it's like, oh, she murdered all these people and kidnapped this baby. And then, of course, we learn that that's not really what happened.
Sorry.
Oh, it's about how stories change, and it's the story is it's more about who's telling it and less about what actually happened.
Right, because what stories will be told about him.
Yes.
Because the movie does a great job at being like, we're going to tell you this story of this woman, Helen, and if you watch the original, you're like, well, that's not how it happened. And then for the people who didn't watch the original, later, someone just flat out says it.
Yeah. That might be my only real complaint. I think the ending's a little shaky. We'll get to that. But my only real complaint is that if you are a fan of the original movie, you know exactly where this movie is going.
Yes.
Like it's more or less the same story.
Yes, that is a problem. So he got stung pretty early on, and the bee sting is slowly taking his hand and then his arm, and he looks almost like a burn victim.
He looks like a beehive, which is what Candyman's, I believe, his chest looks like in the original movie.
Yeah.
And the bees actually come out of his skin.
And so he's slowly turning into Candyman, essentially.
Yeah.
And so I guess we'll get towards the end is what we learn, and we haven't even talked about his girlfriend, because throughout all of this, his girlfriend, they sort of have a breakup. He's losing his mind because he starts realizing Candyman is real. Mm-hmm. He goes to the hospital for his arm. He finds out he was actually born in that area. So he goes to talk to his mom, who is the woman for the original.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, shit. And then you learn, you were the baby.
Yeah.
I didn't tell you because I'm not going to fucking tell you that.
Yeah, because why would I have told you that?
Yeah.
That's a terrible thing to tell your kid.
Yeah, we learned that his girlfriend watched her dad, who was an artist, commit suicide. So, like, this is very, triggering for her that her boyfriend is now losing his mind, it seems. So she's sort of like, okay, I'm not going to get involved. I'm sort of out of this. I mean, she's still obviously concerned for him. She goes to find out what happened to him. She finds the pen that the laundromat gave him, where the guy told him about the legend of Candyman. She goes there, and is that when the thing happens? That's when she
kidnapped. This is
where shit gets weird.
This is where it gets a little wonky. Yeah.
We get to a flashback, and that guy that saw Candyman as a kid, who's telling all the stories, it turns out Candyman actually killed his sibling.
Yes.
Which is a good way of explaining he's out of his fucking mind. They don't really explain why, as much as, like, he's clearly very close to Candyman, more than he let on.
Yeah, he carries the guilt because he screamed because Candyman comes out of the wall like a fucking spider.
Right.
And hands him candy. Like, he screams because Candyman is being creepy. But he screams, and it turned out, they found out later the guy was totally harmless. He just liked to give candy to kids. So he has the guilt of that, and then on top of that, it's the outrage of they're the ones that did this to him. They're the cause of all. They're the reason we have Candyman, and yet Candyman is killing us. Like, that's not right. We need to get Candyman out so he can actually kill some of these white people.
Yes.
Basically.
And so, the main character, he's like in a trance. He brings her to the church, and she has to watch as he cuts off his hand, puts a hook on, is like more or less explaining this. She gets away. It's the most like horror moment because he's like chasing her.
Weird. My criticism and why I think the ending's a little wonky is I don't think we needed the Bond villain character. Like, she could have just, like, that could have all been Yaya. That could have just been Yaya doing that.
Exactly. That is the weird part. That I feel like they needed him to like explain things aloud. Which is weird because, like, Candyman in the original is much more talkative. we could get exposition out of him.
Yeah.
In this,
Candyman
they
wasn't.
have, like,
He also wasn't shy about telling you what he was doing.
exactly. This we have like Candyman's familiar.
Yeah.
Who's like, like creeping around doing this stuff. So it's an abrupt turn for the character
Yes.
and for the movie.
Yeah.
And then she kills him, and so I liked
It's
that
like immediately.
Yeah.
So it's like it really didn't. It became very clear that the character. It's like they added this
He's
character
an exposition machine.
as
Yeah,
an exposition machine primarily to give Yaya the exposition he needs, and also to give us the exposition we need at the end, or that they thought we needed. But also he sort of exists to deflect culpability from Yaya's character.
yeah. And so she kills him. He shows up. And the cops are coming, and he's just like lying there. He's not doing anything.
He's collapsed because he's
collapsed.
He's dying from multiple infections. He just had his hand sawed off with a hacksaw and a hook shoved into his arm. He's dying.
He needs help.
Yeah.
And instead, the cops show up and just shoot him.
Yeah. He's lying on the floor with his head in her lap. Like she's holding him, begging him to cling to life, and the cops show up and shoot him like 3 or 4 times.
Yep. And so she gets in the cop car. They more or less extort her. They're like, here's what we think happened. If you say otherwise, I don't know, maybe you're an accomplice.
Yeah.
So she's like, I want to look at myself in the mirror. I'll tell you what, I'll say whatever you want if I do that. And she summons Candyman.
Yeah.
He shows up, fucking kills all the cops. And then at the very end turns into Tony Todd. And then the movie ends.
And he tells her as it's kind of cool. While Candyman is walking around the police car, his face changes to all the different actors we've seen in the movie. Like it changes from Tony Todd to the actual Candyman guy, and then to Yaya. And his head's kind of a cloud of bees, so his face is constantly changing. Cool idea.
Yeah. Cool idea.
But the last thing he says to her is tell everybody. And so that's, at first he's
like, tell your friends.
Yeah, tell all your friends about Candyman.
This has been Candyman.
Yeah. At first I was a little put off by that ending because I was like, well, I thought the point was that nobody wields Candyman, and that the act of attempting to wield Candyman destroys people. Like that's been pretty heavily the point. But then also like part of the movie is about like reclamation. So it's like, well, that feeds into that theme. So so I kind of that criticism is
and the
there that you can make, but also I think you could argue that this serves another theme of the movie.
Right.
So
It's also the question of the movie itself and art. Is it exploiting something or is it wielding something?
Mm-hmm.
So there's that weird layer on top of it. Weaponizing Candyman it's not a bad idea.
No,
I don't mind the broad strokes of the ending. The impression I got of this film, because this film's 90 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's the length a horror movie can be and should be often. This is one of the ones where I was like, I could have used another like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
It felt a little rushed. There were little moments, like he goes to the hospital for his arm, and they tell him like, yeah, you were born here, by the way. And then he just leaves with his arm wrapped up, and I'm like, I'd sure like to know what the doctors had to say about his arm, but whatever, we're moving on. Like,
I assume he just walked out.
Yeah, that's true. That's not a great example, but of things I need to know more about. But there were a lot of little moments where I'm like, I feel like you could have spent a little more time here. Him talking to his mom, the girlfriend, her backstory, stuff like that. I don't know. It just felt like it felt like maybe in post or something there were some adjustments, and maybe that's where the rumors got started.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, like they probably had to like, toy with the film a little bit. I think in the end it came out great.
It works really well. Yeah, I could see. I see what you're saying. I could see this movie having been, I don't know, 10 minutes longer at one point.
Yeah. I think,
maybe not that much, but
I think there's some pacing issues, and I think the ending is abrupt and like we talked about. It's kind of like out of nowhere to make this guy suddenly bad.
I don't know why we needed another villain.
Yeah, and
we didn't need it. We didn't need another villain on top of Candyman.
Right, and it's hard to understand like what his motivation is.
It makes,
or rather, like, how does he become so unhinged all of a sudden?
Right, it's very sudden that he's unhinged because he seems pretty collected, intense, passionate, but collected.
Right.
So it is kind of out of nowhere. There's also a few flashbacks that are a little jarring. The only thing we see about the girlfriend's backstory with her dad appears to be part of a dream sequence, but it's also a flashback.
Yeah.
And so, like, in the sequence, we see her dad sitting on a windowsill, and he's like, did you know your father can fly? Well, he can, and he jumps out the window. But he's wearing Candyman's coat, and the painting he was working on is a painting of Candyman's face. So
right.
I don't know if the movie is telling us that her dad also was driven insane by Candyman, or is that just Candyman bleeding into her dream memory of what happened to her dad? And the movie is commenting on the broader idea of artists feeling like they have to continuously mine pain and tragedy in order to succeed, that it eventually destroys them.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's
probably the second thing, but the way the flashback is inserted into the film, it's confusing.
It's a bit confusing. I think spending more time with her, I liked her character and her relationship to this guy, and the idea that she's sort of overshadowed by him, and or like feels that way a little bit, it seems. Or like feels like
it's more the opposite.
I guess it's more like people are like, because she's dating him, but he's an artist, and she's trying to like curate exhibits. Yeah. So it like the dynamic is, I think people like kind of murmur about it, and she has a chip on her shoulder about that. And then she's being like, her and her brother are talking about like, we should put up dad's art.
Yeah,
because and that's like, she's the character who like chooses the path of not making those exploitative choices.
Yes.
Because she knows she could make a fortune doing that.
Yes.
With her dad's art, and she's like, I don't want to do that. I want to just get rid of him.
Yeah, and the conversation we see her have with, she has a meeting in the middle of the film with the curator from another museum, and she goes there to talk to this lady, and all this lady wants to talk to her about is her tragic background.
Right.
And she's like, so she is the character that represents, I could get ahead by like picking at this scab, but that's not what I want to do. I feel like that's not good for my soul.
Right.
You know?
And that is a big part of this. It's these people like encouraged to wield their horrible
pain.
backgrounds, their pain for making money, and like it's done in a very a cynical way, everybody talking about it.
Yeah, like his Yaya's buddy Clive literally tells him, like, this art's kind of boring. I've seen this art. What do you got? It's like, well, I thought about maybe doing something about the hood and the specifically where I grew up in the South Side, or I forget where, because Clive immediately says, well, South Side's so played out, so that's good that you have a more specific.
Right,
like,
and then
I'm
he has
sorry.
to change it.
Yeah,
he changes it to a place he has no connection to.
Yep.
And there's the impression that like his pain. I mean, we don't know much about his backstory, growing up, and we learn a lot about his girlfriend instead, who's like clearly had some like real deep emotional pain.
Yeah,
and so it's like implied that like he didn't grow up that bad, or like didn't really get traumatized by anything.
Yeah, the implication is that he's like Virginia Madsen in the first film. He's a tourist. Like he's trying to exploit something that he doesn't even really like. It turns out he does have a connection to it, but he doesn't know it at the time.
Right, exactly.
He's just something he's not even connected to, and he's trying to exploit it for his own gain.
Yeah. It's interesting. All right, so this is something that's unclear in it, because the reveal is, you're the baby from the first one. He kind of just lucks into Candyman in this movie. Is there any implication that Candyman orchestrated this from the start? Like, he learns about it just like researching, like Googling, and like by chance being told the story of Helen, and then goes to the neighborhood and then runs into the guy who he learned is a maniac who's trying to summon Candyman. Is that all a coincidence, or is the idea that he's drawn there because it feels unclear.
It's
like, is it?
I think it's unclear. It's just we're not, the reason we're given for them moving in there is just that, I don't know. They've just moved in. They have a conversation about it's really her apartment because he doesn't make any money.
Right.
So I think it's just kind of chance. And then the crazy laundromat guy later says, I always hoped that you would wind up coming back here because that's just the way these things happen.
Right. And he says later, at one point he says, I feel really clear about this. Like once he starts the art, he's like very, focused on it. I don't know. Maybe it's weird. It's weird to me that it's a wild coincidence. I think I don't know if it's a problem with this film, but something weird about it is the presence of Candyman. Mm-hmm. He doesn't talk at all until the end.
Yeah.
He's just sort of in the mirror. I don't know. That's something you could solve with the idea that he starts having visions of Candyman after hearing about him. You know what I mean? Like, there was a way to make it so that Candyman is directly involved in it more. Candyman's more of like a background character for a lot of this. He doesn't feel like a real, like often where he, his reflection turns into Candyman. Candyman's like a puppet there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's weird. He's like a memory more than he is.
I think that's
until he kills them.
I think that's an appropriate evolution of the character for what this movie is talking about.
That's the thing, is I really do like that.
Yeah.
I kind of like that Candyman is almost in the background. You don't really, he doesn't talk. He doesn't cause things to happen. He's just a presence that's there. Mm-hmm. I think that's a really cool idea.
Yeah.
It just feels different from the original in a way that I'm not sure about. Yeah.
It's very different. I think it works. Like I said, I think it's a good evolution of the character, of the idea, of the theme, the conversation. Right. It's just I think it works very well in this movie. I think it's
interesting because had they done the other way, it would have solved a lot of problems. Like the weird coincidences and stuff. If Candyman was more of an active, had more of an active role in what was happening.
Yeah.
Because as it stands in this version, it is sort of like Candyman gets really lucky as these people discover more about him and as he does this. But I don't know. It's still very good. And I do like his presence in the movie. Mm-hmm.
It's a really cool idea. When he's again, a real simple image is going to live in my head. He floats towards people.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's fucked
great.
up.
And the actor playing him is good. That's what I mean, is that like a lot of my conflicts, my issues are like Candyman fan versus fan of movies.
Yeah.
Where it's like, no, this is how the movie, like I get why the movie was done this way. I like Tony Todd. He's great. I wanted to see more of him.
Yeah. I was delighted when he shows up at the end though.
Yeah.
And they got the tape recorder that's actually Virginia Madsen.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Did they just pull from the original film?
No, that's new dialogue.
Ooh, good for her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was
I mean, but you're right. From a fundamental filmmaking perspective, it is a bit of a wild coincidence that he would just happen to move back to Cabrini Green. And then that's where fate. It's like, sure, but it's a crutch.
It's weird that they could have explained it in like a line. That's the weird part, is like, if he was just naturally drawn to it from the start or something, like it's an easy fix where it's like, oh yeah, it's like Candyman drawing him in. But they don't really do that. It's still fine. It's like fucking whatever.
I mean, I guess it works. No, it does work because the movie is about the broad. When you're thinking about the broad topic, of course he comes back to Candyman because that's where the pain and tragedy is.
Yeah,
like that's what Candyman represents, is all these stories.
Yeah, I think what it is that what I've read about, like the reviews I've read have said this. A lot of them have said this across the board, even the positive ones, is that it's a lot of ideas and they have to, it feels like they're kind of having to fit them all in.
Yeah.
So like him, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. but I see what they're saying, which is like him being the baby from the original feels like a different type of movie than just him being another person who's interested in Candyman who wants to exploit it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that almost feels like two separate ideas. One's more of like a direct horror movie, like Michael Myers idea, where you're related to the whole thing, and the other is more of like the original Candyman point, which is someone who's from the outside exploiting this thing.
Yeah, I think it would have been better if he hadn't been the baby. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the baby stuff, and that ties to the ending, kind of messes it up a little bit.
A little bit.
I kept watching the movie waiting for the baby to show up, like him to go interview the baby. And when it wasn't happening, that's when I was like, oh, I know who the baby is.
He's the baby.
Yeah, and I liked that idea, but it does feel like it belongs in a separate...
It's not the story they were telling, it doesn't seem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That said, I mean, for me, it's like all the critique we're saying, I don't really give a shit because I just enjoyed the movie.
Yeah, this is a good movie.
It was a lot of fun.
I'm mystified what everyone was talking about, all the early murmurings I heard about this movie. It's like, It's coming out. It's done. It had like a $20 million opening night. It has like across the board almost positive reviews.
Theater I was in was packed. The theater, again, I don't think people are finding it particularly scary. They're finding it very entertaining. Like, they laughed. The audience would laugh at the moments that were funny, like him being happy that the guy was murdered. And them saying his name on the news and stuff like that.
When his girlfriend's poking through the laundromat and she opens the creepy basement door and looks down the creepy dark stairs, she says, nope, and shuts the door.
Yeah, the audience laughed. They enjoyed that.
Not doing that.
Yeah, everybody was like into it. It was like everybody leaving was talking about it. I don't think people were particularly... I think it's more like clenched fists, you know?
Yeah.
Watching it.
The theater I was in, it wasn't full because I saw it on a Sunday morning, but like it was dead quiet the entire time. And then at the end of the movie, I heard... Because they were kids. They were like little kids there.
Oh, nice. They gotta learn.
But the kids even, dead silent. Like nobody spoke. And then at the end of the movie, I heard somebody in the back go... That was really scary.
Yeah. It's very unnerving as a movie.
Yeah, this movie shut people up in my theater for 90 minutes.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. Again, I think the horror took a back seat for me in general. So I don't want people to go into this thinking it's going to be like the movie Caveat or anything that's like real or like, you know, something that's just like really tense all the time. Mm-hmm. It was more of like I was enjoying the story. I was enjoying the imagery.
It's a good movie.
It's just a very good movie, and it kept my focus the whole time. Mm-hmm. I was, you know, it's definitely creepy, and it's left a lot of images in my head. But it's not the scariest movie in the world. I also don't think it's trying to be.
No.
So, you know,
most of the violence happens off screen.
Yeah. Yeah. They don't do too much of that.
Which feeds into the theme of exploiting trauma and tragedy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just fucking good shit. Watch it.
Good movie. Also, they tribute the credits.
Yeah.
Not that it matters. They do the reverse of the opening credits.
Yeah.
Of the original Candyman, which ends up being sort of the opening credits of Devil. Remember that? Mm-hmm. Where the city's upside down? Did you get that?
Yeah, that's a real piece of shit.
And then at the end, it wasn't upside down, Tom.
Yeah. No, that's fine.
It's art.
Yeah.
Devil.
It's like poetry. It rhymes.
Yeah. Sorry, everyone.
Yeah,
you had
to fuck this up by bringing Devil in here.
Yeah. No, I really enjoyed it. I can't wait to watch it again.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely going to watch it. Oh, there were epilepsy notices, warnings hanging up outside the theater. There are 2 scenes that are a little intense. So if you're photosensitive, be aware.
My AMC didn't do shit.
There were signs up in the Cinemark where I saw it. It's brief. There's some brief strobing in the elevator scene, but it's really the end where she's sitting in the cop car and the lights on top
that
of the
makes
cruiser,
sense.
and they start to get really intense as the scene intensifies. So that scene is very stroby. So be aware if you are
really well
photosensitive.
made.
Yeah, it's very well done. It doesn't feel the way strobing normally feels, which is like cheap and pointless. And why did you do this?
Right.
But be warned.
Be warned.
So, okay, that's a so.
Yeah, I think we did it.
Yeah, we fucking did it.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Listen, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/gamefully unemployed. You can go on there. You can for $5 a month. You can listen to all sorts of exclusive podcasts like Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Fox Mulder is a Maniac, Star Trek The Next Futurama. Those are all on there for $5 a month. We have a bunch of other tiers too. So just go look at it, jangle things around, play with it,
Yeah, fiddle, we play a little pocket pool with things. You know,
Yeah, fiddle with our Patreon.
fiddle with it like the kid at the end of Back to the Future 3.
Yeah.
And just kind of see what comes up. We also have a store. Head over to gamefullyunemployed.com. You'll find a link to our Teespring store where you can get t-shirts, other things.
Other things. Not just t-shirts.
Yeah, we have like prints and stickers probably, mugs probably. Check that out. Probably.
Yeah.
No, we got a lot of cool stuff. Check that out. Yeah, do the thing. And,
watch Candyman.
Yeah.
Watch the original.
Don't
say
watch,
Candyman
don't
as
watch
many
Devil.
times as you want.
Don't watch
Devil.
Say M. Night Shyamalan's Devil into a mirror 5 times.
Yeah. 5 times. Oh, God. Terrifying.
And then you'll discover you've been dead the whole time. On a beach that makes you old.